I'm Matthew Casey, so I'm a Plant Health Policy Advisor with Defra, and today I'll be taking you through aspects of plant passporting that will be changing from the 1st of January of 2021. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the changes and why the changes are occurring. I'll go through the new content and format of the UK plant passport, some changes to our country of origin guidance, changes to protected zones and pest-free areas, and then run through a quick thing on imports from the EU and plant passports. So just as an overview of the plant passport regime, so post-transition period, Great Britain will move to a UK plant passport system, which will be broadly similar to the EU regime that we're using now. So from the 1st of January, in Great Britain, we will belong to a different sanitary and phytosanitary zone to the rest of the EU. That means that EU plant passports will no longer be recognised in Great Britain, and UK plant passports won't be recognised in the EU. This is because a plant passport is not just a traceability document, it also regards plant health assurance. So when you're authorised to issue plant passports, it's a statement that you have met a minimum standard of plant health. And from the 1st of January, our domestic plant health regime will diverge from the EU regime. And so we will have a separate plant passport system to govern that. So the content and format of the UK plant passport, relatively simple. So there are pictured examples there. So the top two, you can see a UK plant passport on the left and the current EU plant passport format on the right. And then on the bottom, it's the PFA UK plant passport, bottom left, and the EU PZ, so that's the protected zone plant passport on the right. So a summary of these changes, there'll be no flag on UK plant passports. The words plant passport will simply be replaced with UK plant passport. So section A, which is botanical names, will remain the same. Now, the information actually in all this presentation is all available on our plant health portal. So if there's anything you think, oh, I can't quite remember that afterwards, all of this information is on a fact sheet on the plant health portal. So hopefully it's much easier now that you can actually see the pictured examples. So here, so you can see the UK plant passports on the left and the EU plant passports on the right. So you can see there's no flag on the UK plant passport. Part A, which is botanical names, will remain the same as before. So section B of the plant passports, that's a registration number. So on EU plant passports, this was prefixed with the 2-letter code of the member state. Obviously, from the 1st of January, there'll no longer be a need for us to differentiate between other member states. So that prefix with the GB dash will be removed. You will simply have your registration number. Section C on traceability codes will remain the same, and section D will also remain the same, except for some plants for which we have national measures. And I will come on to that list of plants in a bit more detail in a minute. I should say that our guidance on country of origin and when it changes to Great Britain is available on our plant passport page on gov.uk. And I should also say, for pest-free area plant passports, the only difference with the UK plant passport is it will say dash PFA after UK plant passport. And then below that, you have what we sometimes call the PFA code. And that is either the EPO code or the scientific name of the relevant pest-free area pest. This is the same as what we have on current protected zone plant passports. But I will come on to that in more detail in a minute. So, country of origin. So at the moment, your country of origin changes to GB when a plant has been grown on. So for example, quite a lot of material comes into the UK that is NL in origin, as in it's come over from the Netherlands. I should also state that the 2-letter code GB applies to the whole of the UK, including Northern Ireland. This isn't something that's controlled by plant health. GB is the 2-letter ISO code, so that's an internationally recognised code for the UK, and our 2-letter code for the UK happens to be GB. So our guidance will change post-transition period for the following list of commodities. So we have hosts of Xylella, That's plants other than fruits of seeds of olive, coffee, Polygala myrtifolia, and almond. Plants other than seeds intended for planting for lavender, Nerium oleander, and rosemary, and also hosts of Ceratocystis platani, so that's Cancastane of plain, and that's plants of platanus intended for planting other than seeds. And that's essentially, this change means that those commodities must have been in the UK for a whole year following their import before a plant passport issued for their movement can list GB as the country of origin. So the plants can still be marketed in that first year, but they must be traveling on a plant passport that shows the country of origin on it, rather than it being able to change to GB within a couple of weeks or a few weeks. Now, this policy, this specific one on country of origin, applies to the whole of the UK, including Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland will belong to a different phytosanitary zone to Great Britain, but country of origin isn't governed by EU regulation. And that's why we have the discretion for Northern Ireland to remain aligned with us on that in this particular case. So part 4. Protected zones and pest-free areas. So Great Britain will no longer use the EU designation of protected zones after the transition period, and we will instead use the internationally recognised term of pest-free areas. So Britain at the moment has more protected zones designated than any other member state in the EU. Protected zone pests will either become GB quarantine pests, which are absent throughout Great Britain, or they will become pest-free area or PFA pests, which are absent in only parts of Great Britain. Commodities which are hosts of PFA pests will require PFA UK plant passports for their movement within GB. The pest codes on those plant passports, which I mentioned 2 slides before, will remain the same as before. So that's either the scientific name of the pest or its EPO code. So if you're trading in plants of planting of oak now, and you issue protected zone plant passports for them, you would move to the PFA, UK PFA plant passport format, and you will continue to put either the scientific name or the EPO code of oak processionary moth on that plant passport. So for movements within Great Britain from the 1st of January, PFA UK plant passports will only be required regarding oak processionary moth. So imports from the EU and plant passports. Now, broadly, we'll be treating imports from the EU as imports from as we do currently for imports from third countries from the 1st of January for plant passport purposes. So imports from the EU which currently arrive into Great Britain with an EU plant passport will have to be imported with a phytosanitary certificate post-transition period. So I'll refer to that as a PC. So the process for replacing a phytosanitary certificate with a plant passport will remain the same, and that replacement should take place at the first place of destination. That might be a distribution centre or depot, or a retail outlet. If the commodities you trade in require a plant passport now, but you simply move them on under their existing EU plant passport, from the 1st of January 2021, you may need to be authorised to issue a UK plant passport for them. So if you bring in goods under a phytosanitary certificate, those goods go direct to a retail outlet and then don't move on from that retail outlet. You're still simply selling them face-to-face to customers at that store. You don't need to issue a plant passport for them, because those plants aren't moving anywhere else except to a final consumer who you've sold to face-to-face. And that movement, sale and movement wouldn't require a plant passport. If you were to sell those plants online, consistent with our current policy, a plant passport should still be provided to a final user, even if they're buying for personal use, if they're buying online. So if you bring in goods under a phytosanitary certificate, you only need to issue a UK plant passport for them if you are moving them to another professional operator. If you're selling them to final users, that's those buying for personal use by means of distance contract, for example, online. If you are moving them to another one of your own premises, which is more than 10 miles away from the premises to which the consignment arrived, or if the phytosanitary status of the consignment changes. That could be due to a pest infestation. Hopefully, of course, that won't happen. Or if you're growing them on at the site. For retail sites, that's possibly not relevant, but for nurseries, that possibly could be the case. For the first 6 months of 2021, we will allow UK plant passports to be affixed in an EU member state. This approach will be reviewed after 6 months. Those UK plant passports should be in the correct format, i.e. the UK format, not the EU format, and should be attached correctly. However, it should be noted that this extends only to the act of affixing a UK plant passport. EU operators will not be authorised to issue UK plant passports. They will belong to a different phytosanitary zone. They'll be governed by a different set of plant health regulations, and that is a consequence of us sort of leaving the single market, as it were. What this does mean, though, is that if you are an operator based in Great Britain who's responsible for the first place of destination of the relevant consignment, you will need to be authorised to issue those plant passports. You'll be audited under the plant passport regime, and it is your registration number that will go in Part B of the UK plant passport. Those UK passports will have no legal status until they reach that first place of destination in GB. And any non-compliances will be the responsibility of the operator in GB and may prevent plants from being able to move on from the first place of destination. So this is about us making it smoother for people to move on their goods, because your passports, we're allowing those passports to be attached before they reach that first place of destination, so that you don't have to attach them, given that we know a lot of people already have their labels attached, particularly in the Netherlands. So we would advise, of course, that you communicate with your suppliers if this is something you want to do, to ensure that they are aware of what they need to attach and what the labels should look like. So that is the end of that presentation. And yes, are there any questions?
Okay, so we have a question here, and it says, I am an interior landscaper and will be buying plants to then sell or rent under contract to another end user, business or consumer. Do I need to register for plant passports?
By the sounds of it, yes, because you need to issue plant passports for movement of plants for professional purposes. And it sounds like you are moving them on to other professional operators, so you should be authorised to issue plant passports. And on renting plants, I think you do need to issue a plant passport for their movement, because they're still being moved to another professional operator. There is some guidance in our Q&A on that, not our sort of EU exit Q&A, the one we did for when the regulations came in last year. So Liv, and I know we have a record of these questions, but we can come back in more detail on the rented plants question, because it is something we have covered. But a plant passport would need to be issued for those movements. And I understand that landscaping is an area that is newer to the plant passport system than some other areas.
Okay, lovely. We have another question, and it is, can growers have a UK flag if they want to use it for marketing purposes, as in shorthand for grown in Britain?
The short answer is that as the format is governed by the legislation, no. But a plant passport can be part of another label as long as it's distinct and separate. So, for example, you'll see them in a little box on a care label. So what you could do is have a plant passport in a box on a larger label that had a Union Jack on it and said grown in Britain. But it's just that the plant passport needs to be distinct and separate. And the role of the plant passport is as a plant health official label. It's a statement of that you have traceability and assurance in place. And so it's not meant for marketing purposes. So you couldn't actually combine those labels, but you can get around it by putting the UK plant passport in a separate box on a larger label.
Lovely. Another question we have is, we are importers of fruit and vegetables. For what I understand, passports are not required for fruit and veg. Is that correct?
That is correct. So just fruits and veg on their own that can't be planted on won't be needed and going for consumption. I should say that things going for planting will require a passport. So for example, the distinction, probably the best distinction I can use is ware potatoes for consumption, which don't require a plant passport, and seed potatoes, which are going for planting, will require a plant passport. But fresh produce in the food supply chain should not require a plant passport.
Lovely. We have another one here, and please excuse me of my pronunciation of this. But with Xylella and Ceratocystis,
Ceratocystis plataf, yeah.
that's the one. Do you issue the
Yeah.
UK plant passport with the Netherlands, for example, or do they need to keep the EU plant passport on?
You don't need to keep the EU plant passport on. So essentially, we won't be recognizing those EU plant passports. So let's say you bring in one of those Xylella hosts or some planes into the UK into Great Britain from 1st of January. You'll issue the UK plant passport for it, but in section D of that plant passport, it should say NL to state that the country of origin has not yet changed to Britain. If there is still an EU plant passport attached to that commodity, you can leave that passport on. We're not asking people to remove or invalidate EU plant passports brought in from the continent on 1st of January. And this is because they will be automatically invalid when they come in from an EU member state. And we know that given that the Netherlands often pre-print EU plant passports onto pots and label everything, it would be a disproportionate effort for people to do that. So you can leave the EU plant passport on, you can choose to remove it or put a cross through it, but you will need to issue a UK plant passport for it. It can't just keep traveling on the EU plant passport. And on that UK plant passport, it should state NL in part D, if that's where you've imported it from.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Matt. We have a question here about if we are operating as a pod or place of destination for another grower, would we need to issue a plant passport from us, or will their plant passport be issued when they collect after inspection?
Given that they are on your premises, I would expect you would be the one that would need to issue the plant passport. The thing is that that's where the goods have gone to, and that's where the movement is from, and you're responsible for those premises, and it'll be those premises that are audited and inspected. So if you're going to be a pod on behalf of another business partner or operator, I think you would also be the one that needs to be authorized to issue the plant passports.
Okay, a good follow-up question for that is, how do we become authorised to issue UK plant passports, and do we need to be authorised by January 1st, 2021?
If you're already authorised to issue EU plant passports, your authorisation will roll over. You won't need to do a specific different one. If you're not yet authorised to issue plant passports and you want to be issuing them on the 1st of January, then yes, you need to have your authorization in place the 1st of January. So I would look to get authorized as soon as possible. So I can share, and there'd be a question for Liv, I suppose, but we will share the relevant links with this group afterwards. And there is a form for being registered and then also for being authorized to issue plant passports. And those are then submitted to APHA, and those will be processed, and it's free to submit those forms. You'll be charged for an auditing inspection at a later date. That auditing inspection can take place within a year of you being authorized. But the process of becoming authorized, I think, is quite simple. You'll need to fill in that 2 forms and submit them to APHA. And I can share the links to those forms later.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. We have another question here, and it kind of regards seeds. But does the UK plant passport, the seed, need to be on the package, or can it be on the delivery note, which is part of the consignment?
It depends on the context. Generally, are we talking that they can be on a delivery note if it's a sale through a distance sale to a final user, but generally speaking, the passport should be on the packet or box or bag of seed. However, we do have, when you're supplying direct to a final user, so for example, if you were selling packets of tomato seeds to final users and that person bought them online, for those online sales to final users, we do have an allowance for passports to be attached to the delivery note, to the packet, or to be attached on the outside of the delivery package as well. But I think in most cases, when we're talking about movements from one professional operator to another, the passport needs to be physically attached to the sort of package in question.
Lovely. We've had confirmation here that this would be direct to a commercial grower.
Yeah, if it's direct to a commercial grower, that they'll need to be attached to the individual packages.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. Will plants moving from Northern Ireland to Great Britain move on our UK plant passport, and will plants moving on the island of Ireland, example Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland, move on an EU plant passport or a UK plant passport? So there's two bits there. So there's NI to GB, and then there's NI to ROI.
So information regarding movements from Northern Ireland to Great Britain will be available soon, but I'm afraid I won't be able to, I don't have that information at this time. For movements on the island of Ireland, Northern Ireland will remain part of the EU's sanitary and phytosanitary zone. It will continue to comply with EU plant health regulations, and that means all movements on the island of Ireland will be governed for plant purposes by EU plant passports. And that's all part of course, the government's commitment for there to be an open border on Ireland.
Lovely, thank you. Just making a question. If I deliver to a farm site and the farming group decides to move some of the product, do they need to have a plant passport? Possibly within 10 miles, but not always.
If it's seed for sowing and it's going direct to a farmer, then it won't need a plant passport for further movement. If you are moving them on to another premises, you will need to issue a plant passport for that movement. I think in such circumstances, if there's uncertainty about the distance that material is moving, it might be good for the farmer who's being supplied to have a conversation with the supplier about them attaching plant passports that are already attached to the correct unit, essentially, whether or not that's a bag, box, trolley, pallet, so that when they might need to move them on again to another one of their fields or premises, there's already a plant passport attached. They don't necessarily need to issue a new one.
Lovely. So it says here, we have rosemary in the nursery currently labelled up with the old plant passport details, which is overwintered. Will we be allowed to use this label on product as of January 2021?
So it's all on EU plant passports, I assume. So that's a question about EU plant passports, not the changed scientific name of rosemary. So that's what I'll assume that is. Officially, you should be issuing UK plant passports for movements from the 1st of January. Material that is already being moved or marketed before 1st of January can continue to travel on an EU plant passport after the 1st of January. And this is part of transitional arrangements. The thing is, from 1st of January, we have no essential right to continue to issue EU plant passports. because we will no longer even be in a transition period with the EU. However, I know that the Animal and Plant Health Agency, in line with our current enforcement policy and pragmatic approach to non-compliance on plant passports, given the uncertainty of the past year with changing Brexit dates, the snap election last year, COVID-19, and now Brexit again, I think APHA will take a pragmatic approach with people still using up old labels. Regarding, and you might not want to know this, but just to cover all bases, with things like rosemary, where the botanical name has been sort of changed recently, and you think you might be using an outdated one, essentially don't worry about it, about those sorts of things. I think inspectors will take a pragmatic approach, where obviously someone is using what they believe to be the correct scientific name for the commodity, because taxonomy of plants is changing all the time. And I know that that is a question I've had recently from other members of the trade.
Thank you, Matt. So just a follow-up question on the one around Northern Ireland. I know we can't really say much, but it says, just to be sure, based on the previous question, can you confirm a Dutch product with an EU plant passport is accepted in Northern Ireland and it won't need a UK plant passport?
That's correct. However, if you're sending things from the continent direct to Ireland, that will have to go through basically transit procedures. You don't want to basically stop it or open it up anywhere in Great Britain on its way over to the island of Ireland. Because it will be, if you're using GB as a land bridge, the EU needs to be assured that the phytosanitary status is unchanged, and that it's like a closed consignment, basically, that is moving from one part of the EU's SPS zone to another part of the EU's SPS zone. And that is how you would avoid having to issue a UK plant passport or a phytosanitary certificate to movements to Ireland. And I've had this conversation with other operators. If you currently drop stuff off here in Great Britain and then later on then move it onto Ireland, you might want to reconsider how you move those, because it might be more beneficial for you to be able to move things direct from the EU under a transit procedure using GB as a land bridge to Ireland, so that you avoid having to issue UK plant passports or phytosanitary certificates for onward movements to Ireland.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. It says here, we grow and sell oaks. Trees could be in our own fields for 25 years. Do we need to dispatch these with a plant passport label?
If you're dispatching plants for planting of oak for professional purposes, then yes, they'll require a UK plant passport for movement that would then have your registration number in Part B, and we could trace them back to your site. I don't think that the issue of them being planted for a very long time should be an issue. The country of origin would, in such cases, quite obviously be GB. But yes, if you're moving them on for professional purposes, then yes, they'll require a plant passport when dispatched.
Okay, perfect. We have one here about pods and before January 2021. So if material is delivered to a pod pre-December 31st, but then distributed post-January 1st, 2021, do they require a new plant passport?
I would argue no, because they came in and they were marketed and moved under their EU plant passport ahead of the new year. And I would argue that they would then be able to move on an EU plant passport. You might just need to be prepared to, if someone asks you to explain that it was already sort of in circulation ahead of the 1st of January. And that is why it can continue to move on an EU plant passport. So that's all I would say on that one.
Lovely. Another one here. Can we send plants to a private garden centre when they aren't registered as a place of destination? This might be one to take away for the imports team.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Liv?
So it's, can we send plants to a private garden centre when they are not registered as a pod?
I think I need more information. Where are you sending them from? Are you sending them direct from the continent, or because if you're sending them from another premises in GB, I assume you would be the pod, or that the plants are grown in Britain, and then you don't need to be a pod at all because they don't need to undergo import checks. But if you're a professional operator and you're moving things over to another professional operator, you'll need to be registered and authorized to issue plant passports. And if you're based on the continent and you're sending things direct to something like a private garden centre in Britain, I would expect that garden centre may want to look into being registered as a pod, or they will need to think about which port they send their goods through, if they don't want to register as a pod, for where their third country checks are undertaken. But that just sounds like it might be more of a question for the imports team.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Matt. So we have another question here. Does the plant passport have to stay with the plants at all times? We provide plants for hotels on a rental and maintenance contract, which usually go in their own containers and not in grow pots, and will also have multiple plants in the container.
I think in such a case, I'm assuming this is sort of a rental plant situation. I think that would be fine. You'll have to issue a plant passport for it. It might be good to supply a physical or a digital copy of the plant passport to the hotel or similar in question. But I imagine they'll know who the supplier is. And if there were a plant health issue and we came knocking, we'll be able to trace them back to you. But I think in such a situation, I think that would be fine, because it's stopped moving at that point.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Are there any changes to current species that require a plant passport?
There are some changes to the list of commodities which require a plant passport now, versus from 1st of January. All plants for planting, except for seeds, require a plant passport, and some seeds do require a plant passport, but it's not all seeds. So all things like bulbs, tubers, anything that can be planted on, requires a plant passport. Certain types of wood require a plant passport. We have deregulated citrus, for example, from the 1st of January, because the pests of those commodities don't like the climate here, and we don't consider them a biosecurity risk. So the current list is live on gov.uk, and our new list is live, and I can share it with you. It's currently listed in a fairly boring piece of legislation on the government's legislation website, and I'm working on getting a more user-friendly, say, list available, but it will be quite similar to what we have now, and I would say possibly simpler.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. If the bulbs are coming into UK retail on a trolley, can the trolley have a plant passport, or does each individual box of bulbs need a passport?
If a trolley is going direct to a retail outlet from its first place of destination without being modified, then yes, we have an allowance that for movements going direct to retail outlets, a plant passport can cover a mix of plants on a single trolley. And that's where a single sort of delivery note attached to a trolley can have its passport attached. And we made that decision probably about a year or so ago now, to make movements into retail easier. Of course, that's assuming that traceability is maintained for all those plants and plant products on that trolley. And it's on the understanding that that retail outlet is the final stage in the supply chain.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. If we import plants on an EU plant passport, I think this means, and then deliver to a distribution centre, we don't need a UK plant passport, is that correct?
So if you're importing things from the EU now, you'll need a phytosanitary certificate from the 1st of January. That will then, the phytosanitary certificate covers the consignment for plant health purposes up to that first place of destination, which in this case sounds like a distribution centre, I think. And then any onward movements from there require a plant passport, a UK plant passport. And this is in line with what we do for third countries now.
Thank you. We have our warehouse is based in France. Currently, all our seed orders go directly from there to our customer. Will we need to issue a UK plant passport, even if it's not coming into our premises, only to the growers, etc.?
This might be one that we need to take away, or we need a bit more info. So if it is going to direct to growers from France, it should either clear controls at a BCP and go to that grower, or it will go direct to that grower, and I assume then that they're not moving it on again. In which case, you probably don't need to be authorized to issue a plant passport. The growers, once they've grown stuff off from seed and then move on their product, would need to issue a plant passport. But from what it sounds like, from what I understand from that, you won't need to, because it'll be the movement to the grower is just covered by a phytosanitary certificate. And then there are basically no other onward movements. That operator, your customer, is then just growing them on. And if they then move on any other products, they would need to be authorized to issue plant passports.
Lovely, thank you, Matt. We have one here. We make up displays for onward movement. Would passports have to be accompanied for displays?
Yes. If we're talking about shows, it depends on, we assume the plants will come back. So our policy for shows, which of course many haven't happened this year, unfortunately, is that you don't need to issue a plant passport for the movement to the show, because it will simply be coming straight back to you anyway. If you're selling anything on from a display or anything like that at a show, you would need to provide a plant passport if you were selling to another professional operator. But that I would consider that in line with our policy for things like shows. And our policy was that you wouldn't need to issue a plant passport for a show, because you'll have full traceability anyway. And you'll be registered with us as a professional operator. And then the plants, I assume, then would simply come back to your premises after that show. I hope that makes sense. It might be one that we can give more detail on afterwards.
Lovely, thank you. We have one here, and you'll have to excuse me because I don't know what B2B means, but you probably will. It says, we import brassica seed B2B and our customers sell to final grower. We will supply a phytosanitary certificate. Who is responsible for the plant passport?
I would say it is whoever is responsible for the first place of destination here in Britain, because that's where the goods are going to. That's where import checks would likely be cleared if they choose to register as a pod. And it is from there that UK plant passports will be required for onward movement for our internal GB market. And so it makes most sense for that person to be authorised to issue the plant passport. That's where the passports will need to be issued. That will be the site that needs to be audited and inspected.
Lovely, thank you. Can the NL put on a GB plant passport product package? Hang on, let me start over, sorry. Can the NL put on GB passport on product packaging before product enters GB?
Yes. Your UK plant passport may be affixed by your supplier in the Netherlands, or indeed in any other EU member state. This isn't just specific for the Netherlands. For the first 6 months of 2021. However, it will be a UK plant passport. It will be your registration number in Part B of that plant passport. And those passports would have no legal status until they reach that first place of destination in Britain. we're simply allowing operators in the European Union to just do the physical attachment of the labelling, simply to make things smoother for operators here in Britain.